Billionaire took his mute 9-year-old daughter to dinner and froze when a simple waitress made her speak for the first time. Before we dive in, if you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Now let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. The crystal glass slipped from a child's hand and shattered across the floor. For a moment, the grand dining room of the Bellmont Hotel froze. The chandeliers glimmered above, but no one moved. Forks hovered in midair. The string quartet fell into uneasy silence. It was not the glass itself that held the room still. It was what came next. At the center table sat Victor Langford, a man whose face often appeared in business journals. 36 years old, dark suit cut to perfection. His posture carried wealth like a second skin. And beside him, his daughter, a girl of 9 with hair pale as corn silk, stood with wide eyes fixed on the glittering shards. Evelyn Langford, the child who never spoke. The staff moved quickly, as they were trained to. A young waitress, no more than 25, bent to gather the fragments. Her black skirt brushed the floor as she worked. Her name was Clara Hayes. Brown hair tied back neatly. No wasted movement, no nervous flutter. She placed the last shard onto the tray with deliberate calm. But then, something unusual. Evelyn's lips parted. A faint breath, almost a sound, escaped. Guests leaned in, startled. No one had ever heard this girl speak. Not here. Not anywhere. Clara lifted her head. Her eyes met Evelyn's. She did not smile foolishly, nor look away in pity. Instead, she whispered, steady and clear, "Would you like to help me, miss?" The room gasped as if a gun had gone off. Guests glanced toward Victor, waiting for his reaction. His jaw tightened. His hand twitched as though to stop this intrusion. And yet, the girl bent down. She reached for a broken stem of crystal. Her lips trembled. The faintest sound, a syllable not yet formed, hung in the air like a spark. No one clapped. No one breathed. They only stared. Clara did not push further. She accepted the small hand, guided it to the tray, and stood. Her expression was composed, as though nothing remarkable had occurred. But everyone in the room felt the crackle of something impossible, something forbidden. Victor's eyes burned at her, sharp as a blade. Around the room, whispers rose. "Who was that waitress?" "She made the girl. Did you hear?" Clara lowered her gaze, but her posture was unyielding. She did not shrink. She did not apologize. She placed the tray aside, straightened her apron, and returned to her post. The silence broke only when the manager strode forward, his face flushed with authority. The manager's voice, clipped and severe, cut through the tension, turning every eye back to Clara. "Step aside," barked Mr. Hanley, the dining manager, his silver waistcoat gleaming beneath the chandeliers. His voice carried across the hushed tables. "This is not your place." Guests murmured. A few turned their heads back to their meals, unwilling to be caught staring, but most lingered, their curiosity stronger than their manners. They had seen something impossible. A mute child who nearly spoke, and a waitress who dared to draw it out. Clara stood still, her hands clasped before her apron. She did not speak. The silence unsettled the manager more than defiance might have. He shifted his weight, puffed his chest, and gestured sharply toward the kitchen. "You've embarrassed the Langford family. You'll remove yourself at once." Evelyn clutched her father's sleeve. Her small hand gripped tightly, pale knuckles pressing against the black wool. Her mouth opened as if to say something again, but no sound followed. The spark had faded. The crowd sighed in disappointment. Victor Langford's gaze hardened. He gave the faintest nod to Hanley, as though granting permission to swat away a gnat. He would not lower himself to speak to a waitress. Not yet. Clara finally moved. Her voice was soft but steady. "With respect, sir," the child wished to help. That is all. A stir ran through the room. It was not her words, but the calm in which she delivered them, as if she answered not to Hanley, not even to Langford, but to truth itself. Hanley's face darkened. "Do you question me in front of our guests?" His hand rose slightly, as though to seize her arm. From a corner table, an elderly woman in pearls whispered. She wasn't disrespectful. Another guest hushed her, but the seed was planted. The air shifted. A few eyes now watched Hanley with disapproval. Clara did not flinch. She straightened her back. Her voice, though quiet, carried. "No, sir. I serve." A pause. Then, "But I do not humiliate." The words cut through the room. Even the quartet, bowstrings poised, did not dare resume. Hanley's mouth opened, then closed. His authority teetered. Victor's hand lowered from the table. He leaned slightly back in his chair, eyes narrowing at Clara. He had heard the tone. The refusal to cower. That tone was not ordinary for someone in an apron. Hanley recovered, drawing in breath to dismiss her again. But Clara remained where she stood, hands still, gaze lowered but unbroken. She was not moving. And in that pause, Victor Langford himself finally rose from his seat. Victor Langford pushed his chair back with slow precision. The scrape of its legs against the polished marble floor rang louder than any voice. Conversation died in an instant. He stood tall, shoulders squared in his charcoal suit. His cufflinks caught the light like twin sparks. The billionaire was not a man used to explaining himself in public. His presence alone was enough to quiet a boardroom, silence a courtroom, bend mayors to his hand. And yet, as he looked down at his daughter, a faint unease flickered through his eyes. Evelyn clung to his sleeve. Her blonde hair fell in front of her face, hiding her expression. He reached to brush it back, but his hand stalled, hovering. The motion trembled, unfinished, before he lowered it again. The room saw only his restraint. But inside him stirred something raw. Once, long ago, another hand had rested there, his wife's. Margaret Langford. She had been the bridge between him and the child. Her laugh had filled spaces he could not. But she had not lived to see Evelyn's 6th birthday. A winter storm. A car overturned on black ice. A silence that never ended. Since then, Evelyn had not spoken. Doctors had assured him she could, that no physical injury bound her tongue. They blamed trauma. But Victor despised words like that. Trauma. Wound. He believed in contracts, not mysteries. He had buried his grief under empire building. His daughter's silence had become another locked vault in his house of power. Now, in this gilded dining hall, that vault cracked. And it was not by him, but by a stranger in a server's apron. He turned, his gaze pinning Clara where she stood. His voice, deep and measured, cut across the room. "You presume too much." Clara did not raise her head. "I meant no harm." "You draw attention she does not need," Victor continued, his tone controlled, but sharper than a blade. "You think this is kindness? It is spectacle." Evelyn's hand squeezed tighter at his sleeve. For a heartbeat, Victor's mask faltered. He looked down at her, his only child, the one thing he could not command into order. The shame of her silence had followed him everywhere. He had trained himself to ignore it, to bury it under wealth and routine. But the girl had leaned toward the waitress. She had tried, and that unsettled him more than the stares of the entire room. He released her hand, gently, and lifted his chin. The old armor of control slipped back into place. "Enough," he said, voice final. "She needs no one's help." But Evelyn did not sit down. She remained standing, her small frame trembling, eyes fixed on Clara. Evelyn stayed on her feet. Her little hands trembled, her breath shallow, but her eyes did not leave Clara. The child's silence filled the hall more heavily than Victor's command. Guests leaned forward, torn between obedience to the man's authority and curiosity about the girl's defiance. Clara noticed the fear in Evelyn's shoulders, the hesitation before every breath. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped closer. No rush, no sudden movement. She crouched so her gaze was level with the child's. Her voice was no louder than a whisper. "You carried the glass with such care," she said. "Would you carry one more with me?" She extended her hand, palm open, not reaching, only waiting. The crowd shifted. Disbelief mingled with unease. Who was this waitress, to stand before a billionaire's daughter and speak as though they were equals? Someone chuckled nervously, another murmured, "She'll be dismissed for this." Victor's jaw tightened. "That is enough," he said again, his tone heavy with warning. But Clara did not withdraw her hand. Her composure was steady, as though she were in her own kitchen, guiding a child to set a table. She did not command Evelyn. She only offered. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Evelyn lifted her small fingers, hesitant as a bird testing flight. She placed them on Clara's hand. A gasp rippled through the hall. Together, they walked to a nearby table where a fresh glass stood unused. Clara guided the child's hand to its stem, steadying it with her own. Evelyn's lips trembled again, almost forming sound, almost shaping a word. The quartet shifted uneasily, bows hovering. Waiters froze at their stations. Every guest's eyes followed the child. Clara whispered, "There. You can." And for a heartbeat, the silence held power, thick and unbreakable. The girl's small frame straightened. Her grip steadied. The glass did not fall. She placed it onto the tray with care. Gasps, then whispers. Not of scorn, but disbelief. Some eyes softened. Others narrowed, searching for trickery. Victor remained rigid, his face unreadable, yet a faint crack showed at the corner of his mouth, an expression caught between pride and fear. He reached for Evelyn's shoulder, but she stepped just half an inch closer to Clara. A subtle movement. But to those watching, it was rebellion. And in that fragile moment, when the room leaned toward the child's silence, memory stirred, unbidden, in Victor's mind. The glass on the tray gleamed like a jewel. Victor stared at it, and for the first time in years, he did not see numbers or contracts. He saw Margaret. Her laughter had once filled a room like sunlight through tall windows. She had worn a cream wool coat on winter days, her scarf flaring behind her as she hurried to keep Evelyn's tiny hands warm. Victor remembered her voice, steady, gentle, certain. Let her try, Victor. Don't shield her from life. Let her stumble. Let her find her feet. But he had not listened enough. And then one January evening, when the road was slick with ice, the car had gone sideways, tumbling into darkness. He had crawled free with blood in his mouth, and Margaret had not opened her eyes again. In the years since, Evelyn's voice had closed away. Silent dinners, silent rooms. Doctors spoke of therapy. Specialists spoke of patience. None of it mattered. Victor filled the silence with meetings, mergers, acquisitions. A kingdom of glass towers built to guard against the emptiness. Now, in this dining room, he heard his wife's words again. Let her try. His chest ached with memory, and for a moment, his authority faltered. His hand lingered at his daughter's shoulder, but he could not guide her back into her chair. He could not order her silence as he had done before. Across from them, Clara's gaze softened. She remembered, too, a memory not of wealth, but of discipline and hunger. Her mother, Ellen Hayes, standing at a kitchen counter, shaping bread from scarce flour. Steady hands, Clara, she would say, even when life shakes you. Especially then. Ellen had raised her alone. A seamstress by trade, a singer by heart. Cancer had taken her voice, but never her dignity. Clara had worked to cover bills, to study at night. Every plate she carried now was balanced on years of silent discipline. For an instant, the dining hall seemed to collapse into echoes. Margaret's laughter, Ellen's whispered instruction, two mothers whose absence shaped the present. Sir, Hanley's voice intruded, sharp and unwelcome, snapping the thread of memory. Shall I remove her? The crowd stirred. The spell was broken. All eyes turned back to Victor. Slowly, Victor straightened, the moment of memory hidden again behind his controlled expression. He prepared to act. Victor did not sit. His hand left his daughter's shoulder and settled against the back of his chair. His gaze never wavered from Clara, who now stood quietly beside Evelyn, hands folded once more at her apron. The manager, Mr. Hanley, waited for his order. The other guests held their breath. Even the quartet had not dared resume. The silence pressed in, heavier than the chandeliers above. At last, Victor spoke. His words were measured, controlled, but every syllable carried weight. What is your name? The room rippled. A billionaire, speaking to a waitress. Heads turned. A woman in furs raised her brows. A man at the far table whispered, "He never addresses the staff." Clara did not fidget. Her reply came clear, though quiet. Clara Hayes, sir. Victor studied her a long while, as though searching for cracks. He saw none. Her composure was unusual. Most servers shook when he spoke. Most looked away, bowed too low, offered apologies he had not demanded. She did not. "You will see me tomorrow," he said. His voice carried not suggestion, but command. Gasps rustled across the tables. Tomorrow. It was not dismissal, but summons. Guests looked from one another to Clara, astonished. Clara's throat tightened, though her face remained calm. Tomorrow? In his world, the world of power and steel? She felt her mother's words steadying her. Even when life shakes you. Especially then. She inclined her head, only slightly. "Yes, sir." Hanley sputtered, confusion mixing with fear. "Mr. Langford, surely this." But Victor raised a hand, silencing him without so much as a glance. He returned his attention to Evelyn, who still lingered close to Clara. "Sit now," he told his daughter. The girl obeyed, but her eyes did not leave Clara until the waitress moved back into the shadows of her station. Clara carried the empty tray with steady steps, though her pulse thrummed like a drum. Around her, whispers lingered. She did not meet their eyes. She kept her dignity wrapped around her like a shield. Victor sat again, but the meal did not resume as before. Something had shifted. No one in that room would forget the moment. When Clara left the dining hall that night, the weight of tomorrow pressed on her shoulders like an unseen hand. The next morning, Clara stood before glass doors taller than any she had ever seen. The Langford Tower. 40 floors of polished steel and white stone. The air smelled faintly of leather and paper money, though she had only stepped into the lobby. Her black skirt and white blouse were pressed clean, though they belonged to no uniform here. A line of men in dark suits passed her without pause, each with polished shoes that clicked like clocks. Women in silk jackets glanced briefly, some with faint amusement. She carried no briefcase, only a worn notebook tucked in her bag. She stepped forward. The marble beneath her feet reflected her small figure like water. Behind a wide counter, a receptionist looked up, lips painted sharp red. "Yes?" the woman asked, clipped, already impatient. "Clara Hayes," she answered. "Mr. Langford requested me." The receptionist's brow arched. A pause, then a smile that did not reach her eyes. "And you are staff?" "I serve," Clara said simply. That answer unsettled the woman. She tapped her screen, frowned, then lifted her phone. A brief murmur passed between her and someone unseen. At last, she nodded, though her voice turned dry as chalk. "Wait here. Someone will escort you." Clara stood still, her hands folded. She felt the eyes of the lobby on her. Security officers near the elevators. Assistants passing with files. They looked her over as though she were out of place, and she was. A girl from a quiet street, a seamstress's daughter, standing where fortunes changed by the hour. Minutes stretched. The quiet pressed heavier than words. A man in a gray suit passed close and whispered, not bothering to lower his voice. "What is she doing here?" His companion smirked. "Perhaps charity." Clara's shoulders did not stiffen. She let the whispers slide, though each cut reminded her she did not belong. Yet her mother's lessons echoed again. Dignity is not given, Clara. It is held. At last, an assistant appeared. A young man with polished hair, tie knotted too tightly. He eyed her with skepticism, as though she were some puzzle delivered to his desk. "This way," he said curtly, and turned without waiting. Clara followed. Through security gates, into an elevator of brass and mirrors. Her reflection met her eyes, plain, modest, out of place among marble and steel. The floor number rose. 30, 35, 40. The doors opened. She stepped into the top floor corridor, the heart of Victor Langford's empire. The corridor was long and quiet, its walls paneled in dark wood, its carpet thick enough to swallow every step. Oil paintings of ships and mountains hung in gilded frames. Clara followed the assistant in silence, though she felt the weight of each portrait's gaze, each symbol of conquest chosen carefully for this place. They stopped before a set of glass doors that rose nearly to the ceiling. The assistant straightened his tie, glanced once more at Clara, then pushed them open. Inside, Victor Langford's office spread like a private world. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A single desk of dark oak sat near the center, not cluttered, but precise. Papers stacked in neat lines, a silver pen set perfectly parallel. Behind it, Victor stood, his suit jacket removed, his white shirt crisp, sleeves rolled. The man himself was sharper than his empire, the air bending around him. The assistant cleared his throat. "Miss Hayes." He left quickly, almost relieved to escape the room. Clara stepped forward. Her shoes sank into the carpet. She clasped her hands lightly, waiting. Victor did not greet her. He studied her as though she were a file, a balance sheet, a transaction to be weighed. After a silence that stretched too long, he spoke. "You stand differently than most who come here. You are not nervous." Clara's eyes met his for a moment, then lowered again. Nervousness does not help the work. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Work? Is that what you call what you did last night? You put my daughter on display before 100 strangers." "I let her try," Clara said evenly. "You presume you know better than her father?" His words were soft, yet dangerous. Like glass before it cracks. Clara's hands remained steady. "No, sir. But sometimes a stranger sees what family has learned to look past." The air in the room shifted. Victor leaned forward, resting his palms on the desk. "Do you have any idea who I am? The power I hold?" Her reply was calm. "I know power when I see it. But I also know silence when I hear it. Last night, sir, your daughter wanted to speak." For the first time, Victor blinked. Her tone was not arrogant, not defiant. It was something rarer, unshaken honesty. The quiet stretched. Then, almost unexpectedly, he straightened. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with curiosity. "You are wasted as a waitress." He paused, then delivered the words that would stun even himself. "Come work for me." Clara's breath caught, though her face remained calm. Slowly, she realized this was no offer of kindness. It was a test. For a moment, the words hung in the air like smoke. "Come work for me." Clara's pulse steadied against the silence. She had been offered jobs before, extra shifts, a chance at more tips, small tokens dressed as opportunity. But this was not a job offer. It was ownership disguised as generosity. Victor Langford leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled before him. His gaze was level, his tone casual, but beneath it lay command. "You'd have more here than you could ever earn in that dining hall. Comfort, security, a salary that would make your hands tremble to sign." Clara did not move. She thought of her mother at a kitchen table, hands raw from sewing, turning coins in her palm to decide whether bread or milk must wait another day. Comfort had never been promised to them. Security had never been offered. Only work and dignity in how it was done. Her voice came measured, respectful, but unyielding. "I do not work for men who think they can buy people." The words landed like stones in water. The office seemed to still, its silence deepening. Victor blinked once. In boardrooms, refusals never came to him. Executives, mayors, even governors bent to his terms. Yet here stood a waitress in a plain blouse, her hands folded, her voice calm, telling him no. "You misunderstand," he said, his tone edged. "I am offering you a future." "No," Clara replied, her voice soft as thread but firm as steel. "You are offering me chains, wrapped in silk. That is not my future." The faintest flush touched Victor's cheek. His jaw tightened. He rose to his feet again, taller than her by a full head, his presence filling the office. "Do you know how rare it is that I extend my hand to anyone outside my world?" "I know," Clara answered. "That is why I will not take it. I will not belong to anyone's world but my own." Victor studied her. The anger he had expected to feel never came. Instead, confusion. A flicker of respect he could not admit, even to himself. Clara reached into her bag and withdrew her small notebook. Its cover was worn, the corners frayed. She set it gently on the edge of his desk. "This is mine," she said quietly. "My work. My calling. If you truly wish to know me, it is written here." And with that, she stepped back. She had no need to argue further. She had left her mark. Victor's hand hovered over the notebook, as though it might burn him if he touched it. Victor Langford stood alone in his office after Clara left. The glass doors had closed with a whisper, but their silence lingered. His eyes remained fixed on the notebook resting on the corner of his desk. It was not much to look at, thin, bound in faded brown, its spine worn from use. The kind of object he would usually dismiss as clutter. Yet his hand would not move to sweep it aside. Instead, it hovered above the cover, hesitant. He had faced billion-dollar acquisitions with less hesitation than this. What power could a waitress's notebook hold? And yet, she had refused him. Not angrily, not rashly, with a calmness that stripped him of his usual weapons. She had left this behind like a challenge. Or perhaps, a mirror. Victor lowered himself into the chair. For a moment, he only stared at the notebook, his jaw set. His daughter's face returned to him. Evelyn, standing close to the young woman, nearly speaking. Margaret's voice, too, haunted him still. Let her try. He pushed the memory away and finally opened the notebook. Inside, page after page filled with tidy handwriting. Diagrams. Notes. Ideas. Words that spoke not of restaurant shifts or household accounts, but of patterns in speech development, methods of training, drawings of exercises for children who could not speak. Each page was steady, detailed, and marked with care. Not scribbles. Not dreaming. Plans. Victor's breath grew shallow. He turned another page, then another. The precision was undeniable. Whoever Clara Hayes was, she was not only a waitress. She was something else, something he had not yet named. He leaned back, eyes still on the notebook, but his hand rose to rub at his temple. What does she want? The question circled like a hawk in his mind. She had said nothing of money, nothing of fame. Only dignity, only calling. Downstairs, in the lobby, assistants and guards carried on as usual. Phones rang, meetings filled schedules. But at the top floor, the empire paused, dented by the presence of a single waitress and her quiet refusal. Victor closed the notebook, though his hand lingered on the cover. He had spent his life dismissing things that could not be measured in profit. But for the first time, he found himself unwilling to dismiss this. He exhaled slowly, gaze drifting toward the wide windows and the city beyond. His reflection looked back at him, powerful, controlled, but faintly uncertain. And while Victor sat with doubt for the first time in years, Clara returned to her own world, where others waited. The warehouse smelled of sawdust, paint, and faintly of old linoleum. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, dust motes floating in slow, lazy swirls. Children laughed in half-formed circles, some in wheelchairs, some gripping crutches, others balancing on braces. Their laughter carried a fragile joy, as if it had to be nurtured carefully. Clara moved among them with quiet authority. Her apron was streaked with paint, her hands marked with the evidence of hours spent sanding, assembling, and repairing. Nothing here glittered. Nothing here gleamed. And yet, this place shimmered with a different kind of richness, the wealth of effort, of dedication, of unseen victories. She knelt beside a boy named Marcus, blonde hair tangled, eyes wide with curiosity. "Try again," she said gently. Her hand steadied his as he attempted to lift a small wooden plane. It trembled in his grasp, but he held it, and for a moment, he smiled in triumph. Nearby, her mother, Ellen Hayes, passed trays of water and snacks. Her movements were precise, careful, a reflection of years spent managing scarcity with grace. She caught Clara's eye and gave a small, proud nod. They both understood. This work mattered more than any salary or title. The community here was humble, yet resolute. Volunteers, mostly young adults with kind hands and patient eyes, moved through the space, carrying tools, clearing areas, lifting spirits. Each child was met with expectation and encouragement. Clara's voice, though soft, commanded attention because it carried authority grounded in empathy, not fear. A small group huddled in a corner, working on a balance exercise. Clara's eyes lingered on Evelyn's future, imagining a child like her own, fragile but determined, finding strength in this very space. She did not know the wealthy father who had been so close, watching, judging, dismissing. That world existed elsewhere. Here, they built quietly, with purpose. The door creaked, pulling Clara's attention. Outside, parked on the street, a sleek black car gleamed in the sun. Too polished, too grand for this modest neighborhood. She froze, sensing the shift in energy before it even occurred. The children paused mid-laugh, some looking curiously toward the door, sensing adult tension. Her mother moved instinctively to block the doorway, but Clara held up a hand. Let them enter, she thought. There was dignity in meeting the world on your terms, even when it arrived in a vehicle that shouted of privilege. Inside, the children resumed their activities, unaware that a presence from another life waited beyond the threshold. Clara adjusted her apron, took a slow breath, and stepped forward, welcoming the challenge that was about to unfold. The polished car door opened, revealing a tall figure, his posture rigid, and a small blonde child hesitating at the edge of this world. Clara's community, quiet and unshaken, looked up. The warehouse door swung open with a gentle creak, revealing a man in his mid-30s, sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. His polished shoes clicked against the concrete floor as he hesitated at the threshold, scanning the space with the precision of someone accustomed to authority. Behind him, a small blonde girl peered out from the shadow of his coat. Evelyn Langford, no more than 7, her hair gleaming like spun gold, clutched a worn stuffed rabbit. Her eyes darted between the children, wide with curiosity and attentive wonder. The sounds of laughter, the smell of sawdust and paint, even the sight of unpolished wooden toys. Everything was foreign to her world of marble floors and quiet luxury. The children froze, sensing the unfamiliar tension in the air. Marcus's small hand tightened around his plane, and others instinctively leaned closer to Clara, whose presence radiated calm control. Clara straightened, apron streaked with paint, and took a deliberate step forward. Her hands were steady, her posture quiet but commanding. Victor Langford cleared his throat. His voice, deep and measured, cut through the ambient noise. We were invited." A whisper rippled through the room. Volunteers exchanged glances, unsure whether to speak or remain still. Clara inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the interruption without breaking her composure. Her eyes softened when they met Evelyn's. "Come in," she said, voice even and warm. "There's space for everyone." Victor's jaw tightened. He was accustomed to control, to shaping environments to his will. Here, the rules were different. Clara had authority, and it was not granted. It was earned through presence, through competence. He shifted uneasily. The warehouse, simple and unassuming, suddenly felt monumental, a quiet declaration of values he could not bend with money or status. Evelyn stepped forward, slowly, her gaze drawn to a small group balancing on braces. She mimicked a movement, uncertain but intrigued. Clara smiled faintly, kneeling to bring herself to eye level with the child. "You can try if you like," she said softly, gesturing to the activity without demanding, without pity. Victor watched, silent, as the power dynamics subtly inverted. Here, he was the outsider. His wealth, his influence, even his protective instincts, none of it granted him the authority he was used to wielding. Every pair of eyes on him reminded him of this fact. The children returned to their activities, their laughter resuming, yet tinged with curiosity about the new arrivals. Clara remained composed, welcoming yet measured, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. Evelyn inched forward again, her small hands reaching toward the activity, while Victor's posture stiffened, caught between pride, fear, and awe. Clara gestured for Evelyn to join, her calm authority bridging the gap. Victor stood back, watching, uncertain, as the child hesitated, and then began to move toward the circle. Once Victor and Evelyn had settled at the edge of the activity circle, Clara allowed herself a brief pause. Her gaze swept across the room, catching glimpses of sketches, notes, and small inventions tucked into corners. The community space, humble and chaotic, hid something far more deliberate than it appeared at first glance. Beneath a folding table covered with paints and tools, a stack of notebooks lay neatly tied with a worn leather strap. Diagrams of prosthetics, balance devices, and adaptive equipment peeked from the edges. Her handwriting was precise, thoughtful, plans that went far beyond simple repairs or makeshift games. Each page carried the weight of intention, research, and years of quiet observation. Clara moved to a cabinet, retrieving a small model of a rehabilitation device she had been testing for months. She placed it on the table, aligning it carefully with a sheet detailing its intended use. Her mother, Ellen, watched silently from the side, her expression one of proud recognition. She had seen her daughter work tirelessly in obscurity, building knowledge and skill in a world that rarely paused to notice. Victor's eyes wandered. He had followed Clara's gaze, curious despite himself. "You planned all this?" he asked, his tone tentative, betraying a mixture of skepticism and awe. Clara glanced at him without defensiveness. "Not for recognition," she said softly. "For them. For every child who doesn't have the resources to be seen, to be heard, to grow." Evelyn's small fingers traced the edge of a balance board, testing the texture, the sturdiness. She looked up at Clara, a silent question in her wide blue eyes. Clara knelt beside her, guiding her gently, showing her how to engage with the equipment. The child's laughter, light and unguarded, filled the room. Victor shifted, suddenly aware that the authority he relied upon in the corporate world carried little weight here. Clara's presence commanded attention, not because of wealth or status, but through competence, purpose, and quiet confidence. The child's trust, earned, not given, spoke louder than any polished speech he could make. One of the volunteers, a young man named Henry, lingered near the edge of the room. "What exactly are you planning, Clara?" he asked quietly. She offered a small, enigmatic smile. "A future where none of them feel invisible," she replied, deliberately measured, revealing enough to inspire belief but withholding full detail. The work was ongoing, evolving, not yet ready for public scrutiny. Victor's gaze fell on the leather-bound notebooks again. Each one contained months, even years, of meticulous notes, designs, and personal reflections. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that Clara was not simply a waitress or caretaker. She was a strategist, a visionary, quietly reshaping the possibilities of this small corner of the world. Evelyn looked up at Clara again, smiling with confidence. Victor, still processing, realized that he had entered a space he could not control, a world that demanded humility and attention. The soft creak of the warehouse door signaled another arrival. Clara's posture remained steady, but her eyes lit with recognition. From the shadows stepped a woman in her late 60s, silver hair tied neatly in a bun, wearing a simple cardigan and slacks. Her movements were precise, measured, yet unhurried, the kind of discipline that comes from decades of experience. This was Dr. Margaret Ellis, retired pediatric neurologist and Clara's longtime mentor. Victor, who had been observing quietly, straightened instinctively. There was an unspoken authority in the way Dr. Ellis surveyed the room. She moved directly toward Clara, stopping beside her. "Everything here," she said softly, nodding at the tables, the children, the devices, "is not improvisation. It's informed. Each tool, each activity, every adjustment has been tested, evaluated, and recorded." Clara's mother, Ellen, smiled faintly from across the room. "She's been building this quietly for years," Ellen said, pride threading her words. "Not for applause, not for recognition." Victor's brows furrowed. He leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying both curiosity and a hint of defensiveness. "You mean to say she designed all of this? The equipment, the methods, the program?" Dr. Ellis nodded, her eyes steady and discerning. "Yes, Clara has not only studied the mechanics of rehabilitation, but also the psychology of engagement. She understands how children respond to autonomy, how dignity and trust accelerate progress. What she has created is a framework with measurable outcomes, far beyond anything most clinics achieve with triple the budget." The warehouse, humble and unpolished, felt suddenly charged with quiet gravity. Volunteers instinctively took a step back, sensing that Clara's expertise had just been validated by someone whose judgment could not be questioned lightly. Victor shifted uncomfortably. His corporate authority, sharp suits, and expensive tastes were suddenly irrelevant in this space where skill, insight, and dedication reigned supreme. Evelyn, oblivious to the subtle tension, moved toward the adaptive equipment, her small hands exploring, her curiosity unrestrained. Clara guided her patiently, demonstrating with care. Dr. Ellis watched, approving the precision of Clara's touch, her focus, her calm authority. Every gesture confirmed that Clara's work was not about spectacle. It was about impact. Victor's posture softened imperceptibly, a sign of recognition creeping in. Dr. Ellis addressed him, voice steady but commanding. "You may bring resources and influence, Mr. Langford, but it is her presence and knowledge that shape results. You are witnessing leadership in its quietest form." Victor exhaled, eyes sweeping the warehouse once more. He realized he had underestimated Clara, misjudged the situation, and now confronted the undeniable truth. She was extraordinary, not by inheritance or opportunity, but through discipline, purpose, and resilience. As Evelyn laughed softly, engaged in her first moment of unself-conscious play, Victor silently acknowledged that Clara's work demanded respect and his cooperation. The mentor's presence had sealed the recognition he could no longer avoid. Victor's jaw tightened as he studied Clara. He had seen authority, wealth, and influence bend situations to his will countless times. But here, in this modest warehouse, none of it applied. His daughter, Evelyn, now fully engaged with the adaptive equipment, giggled softly, a sound that seemed to underscore Clara's competence. "Clara," Victor began, voice calm but sharp, "you orchestrated all of this, didn't you? You planned the visit, the demonstration, even involved my daughter. How do I know this isn't manipulation?" His tone was measured, but the weight behind it demanded answers. Clara remained composed, kneeling beside Evelyn, adjusting her posture gently. "I do not manipulate children or their families," she replied evenly. Her voice carried authority, not defensiveness. "What you see is the result of consistent effort, observation, and the trust I've built over time. There is no showmanship here." Victor's gaze flicked to Dr. Ellis, seeking confirmation. The elder woman met his eyes with unwavering calm. "He is right to question what he does not understand," Dr. Ellis said. "But this is not orchestrated. This is applied knowledge, accumulated insight, and disciplined practice. Clara's results speak louder than any words you could demand." Victor exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I have seen professionals claim expertise before." And then, his sentence trailed, hinting at past disappointments, failures, perhaps betrayals. "I cannot afford to be misled." Clara rose slowly, meeting his gaze without flinch. "Then watch and judge by evidence, not assumption. Nothing here is fabricated. Nothing is staged. The children's progress is the proof. Your daughter's growth is proof." Her eyes softened as she glanced at Evelyn, who had paused to look up at her, trust unspoken but complete. The volunteers, silent observers until now, began to sense the tension between the two adults. They watched, held breath and posture tight, as Clara's quiet confidence met Victor's carefully restrained skepticism. Even Ellen, Clara's mother, felt the pressure of the moment, sensing the stakes were higher than any recognition or praise. They were about trust, truth, and the integrity of intent. Before Victor could respond, Evelyn, encouraged by Clara's patient guidance, performed a small, precise movement with a device, a balance adjustment she had never mastered before. The room fell silent. Even Victor's stern expression faltered. Eyes widened, mouths barely whispered, and the magnitude of the child's achievement struck the warehouse like a sudden, undeniable chord. Victor froze, seeing firsthand what Clara had promised. The skepticism in his mind battled with the clarity of evidence in front of him. Clara's patience, skill, and moral integrity were now irrefutable. As the crowd's murmurs of astonishment settled, Victor's posture shifted, and he finally recognized that the next step would require action, not words, not authority, but acceptance. The challenge had been met. The warehouse held its breath. Evelyn's small hands gripped the adaptive device, her blonde hair catching the light from the high windows. She had never executed this sequence on her own, ever. Clara's calm presence was steady at her side, her fingers poised to adjust, her eyes never leaving the child's concentration. A hush fell over the volunteers and observers. Victor, stiff and immobile, felt the air tighten around him. He had prepared for negotiation, persuasion, even confrontation, but nothing had readied him for this simple, profound display of competence. Evelyn moved deliberately, each gesture a quiet triumph. The device responded perfectly, her body adjusting with newfound control, a small smile forming as she realized she had succeeded. Dr. Ellis, standing slightly behind Clara, exhaled gently. "Observe," she said, voice soft but firm. "This is what discipline and trust achieve, not orders or influence." Her gaze swept the room, ensuring that every witness understood the weight of the moment. Clara crouched lower, guiding Evelyn's hands with subtle adjustments, allowing the child to feel mastery rather than be guided. "Good, Evelyn," she whispered, not for applause but for affirmation. The child's eyes sparkled. This was recognition she understood, a confirmation she could feel. Victor's face betrayed his astonishment. He had expected effort, perhaps small gains, but this was transformation before his eyes. His daughter, who had struggled with silence and limitation, had just achieved a feat that felt almost impossible. The room, too, seemed to pause, time compressing around the significance of the act. Even the volunteers, who had long admired Clara quietly, felt the moment as a tangible shift. Whispers began, soft and reverent. "She did it. She really did it." The air vibrated with acknowledgement, not of wealth or power, but of quiet skill and unassailable dedication. Victor's voice broke through the silence, almost inaudible to everyone but himself. This is beyond anything I imagined," he murmured, partly to himself, partly to Clara. His eyes, still locked on his daughter, reflected a mixture of wonder, humility, and an unspoken admission. He had been wrong to doubt. Clara allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible nod. No triumph was displayed, only the quiet dignity of mastery validated by results. Evelyn's laughter, soft and delighted, filled the space, a tiny victory amplified by the hushed awe of every adult in the room. The shift was complete. Victor, once a skeptic armed with authority and doubt, now stood witness to undeniable proof. Every gesture, every carefully honed skill, every moment of Clara's patient mentorship had led to this singular, transformative instance. As the murmurs settled and the volunteers returned to their tasks, all eyes subtly shifted to Victor. The question was no longer whether Clara could lead. Proof had been given. Now, it was his turn to choose whether to embrace it. Victor remained still, hands loosely clasped in front of him, his sharp suit taut across broad shoulders. The warehouse buzzed softly around him, children adjusting adaptive devices, volunteers whispering encouragement, but he felt removed, suspended between two possibilities. He watched Evelyn, small and determined, manipulate the device with ease. Each motion was measured, confident, deliberate. Clara stepped back, letting the child take the lead. Every success, every subtle adjustment, proved the months of patient training and careful guidance had produced something extraordinary. Victor's mind raced. Pride urged him to retreat, to deny the significance of what he had witnessed. Admit he was wrong? Accept that a waitress, a young woman with no title or status, had achieved results he could not command with wealth or authority. His ego recoiled. Yet truth pressed against his chest like a weight he could not lift. He recalled earlier years, Evelyn's frustrated attempts to communicate, the sterile suggestions of doctors, his own helplessness when money and influence failed. He had always believed solutions could be purchased, control imposed, but now he saw the limits of power when faced with patience, skill, and human dedication. Victor shifted his stance. One path led to retreat. Maintain control, preserve pride, deny the validity of Clara's work. Another path demanded acknowledgement, support the mission, relinquish personal ego, and trust in what had been accomplished. The silence around him thickened, the air taut with unspoken expectation. He glanced at Clara. She did not speak or gesture, only met his gaze with calm, unwavering steadiness. There was no coercion, No demand, only presence. In that quiet, Victor recognized her authority. Not the authority of title or wealth, but of competence earned through discipline, precision, and patience. A slow breath escaped him. The choice became clear. Retreat was no longer possible. Denial would insult not only Clara but the truth unfolding before his eyes. "I see it," he said finally, voice low but carrying. "I see what has been built here, and I cannot ignore it." Heads turned, volunteers paused. Evelyn looked up, sensing the shift. Victor's shoulders, once rigid with the weight of authority, loosened slightly, a silent surrender to reality. The acknowledgement carried more power than any command he could give. The fork had been crossed, not with force, influence, or wealth, but through the undeniable clarity of proof, patience, and quiet strength. In that moment, Victor chose humility over pride, support over skepticism, presence over control. Witnesses absorbed his choice, understanding its gravity. The next step would carry that decision beyond the warehouse, into the public eye, where accountability and commitment awaited. The press had gathered in the courtyard outside the warehouse. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and the hum of engines and footsteps filled the air. Victor stepped forward, his tailored navy suit crisp against the afternoon sun. He did not fidget or glance away. This was no performance, it was acknowledgement. Clara stood behind him, composed, hands folded, her presence calm, yet commanding. Evelyn, small and golden-haired, clutched a tablet, her eyes wide with curiosity, unaware of the weight of the moment. The volunteers and children lined the sides, their quiet energy lending gravity to the scene. Victor raised his voice, measured, deliberate, free of artifice. "What has been achieved here is real. It is the product of patience, skill, and integrity. I have watched it with my own eyes, and I cannot deny it any longer." The murmurs grew louder. Cameras captured every shift of expression, every subtle gesture. Reporters scribbled notes, sensing the unusual sincerity behind words rarely so public, so unguarded. Victor paused, allowing the weight of truth to settle in the space around him. He continued, "I commit, fully, to supporting Clara and her work, to providing the resources, oversight, and partnership required to ensure this mission reaches its potential. Not as charity, not as spectacle, but as responsibility. Responsibility to those whose needs have been long overlooked." There was a brief silence, then a ripple of applause from the volunteers and staff. Clara's lips curved into a small, quiet smile. Evelyn looked up, sensing the calm authority of her father's voice now aligned with truth. Victor's words carried beyond the warehouse walls, reaching the media, the community, and the wider network of stakeholders he influenced daily. He had not delivered a press release filled with platitudes. He had spoken with the raw honesty of a man confronting his own preconceptions. He glanced at Clara. No words passed between them, only acknowledgement of mutual respect. In that simple exchange lay the foundation of a partnership built not on power, but on integrity. Cameras continued to click. Reporters leaned forward, capturing the moment where wealth met humility, authority met patience, and privilege met proof. Victor stepped back, allowing Clara to move forward if needed, deferring attention, demonstrating that this recognition was not about him. The crowd understood. This was not a ceremonial gesture. It was a public decision forged in real time, observed and validated by those present. The commitment was binding, yet it carried no grandeur, only the quiet dignity of truth recognized and embraced. The lesson lingered. Power, when tempered by humility, could amplify what skill and persistence alone had achieved. Victor had chosen to cross the line from authority to ally, from observer to participant, and the world would notice. As cameras clicked and whispers spread, the work of transformation began in earnest. Clara's mission, once confined to quiet dedication, was now poised to reach far beyond the warehouse walls. Months had passed since Victor's public acknowledgement. The warehouse had transformed into a structured rehabilitation and community center. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of children at therapy stations, some in wheelchairs, some practicing motor skills, all moving with purpose and guided patience. Clara walked the length of the center, clipboard in hand, observing progress. She wore a simple blouse and trousers, practical yet dignified. Her hair was pulled back, neat, and her expression carried a quiet satisfaction. Volunteers and staff greeted her warmly, their trust in her leadership now evident in every measured movement. Evelyn darted between stations, tablet in hand, issuing instructions and encouragement. The golden-haired child had grown more confident, her laughter now a common sound echoing off the walls. Victor, watching from a corner, wore a muted suit but moved with ease among the children, assisting where he could. His presence no longer carried the distance of authority, but the gentle steadiness of involvement. The progress was tangible. Devices that once required careful adjustment now functioned with independent operation. Children who had been hesitant to engage now laughed, challenged themselves, and discovered newfound mobility. Each breakthrough was a small victory, amplified by the collective energy of the community surrounding them. Clara paused by a small table, where a notebook lay open, filled with diagrams, observations, and strategies. She reflected on the months of disciplined work, the obstacles overcome, and the patience required to guide each child's progress. Every line in the notebook represented not just data, but a life changed, a dignity restored. Victor approached, observing the tablet in Evelyn's hands. He spoke quietly. "I never imagined I'd learn so much from this space, or from you." Clara looked up, meeting his eyes with steady composure. "Learning is not limited by wealth or status," she said simply. Outside, construction crews had begun expanding the facility, adding therapy rooms, activity spaces, and accessible gardens. The sounds of progress, the hum of drills, the shuffle of workers, the laughter of children, blended into a rhythm of transformation. Clara guided Victor and Evelyn to the center's small outdoor garden. Sunlight fell across the pathways, and a symbolic wooden plaque at the entrance bore a simple inscription: "Strength is nurtured, not bought." Victor knelt beside Evelyn, helping her adjust a support device, his earlier hesitancy replaced by attentiveness. In this quiet moment, the three of them shared an unspoken understanding. Transformation was not a single act, nor a public declaration. It was consistent presence, careful guidance, and the reclaiming of dignity through sustained effort. As the day wound down, the center hummed with life and purpose. The final chapter, a symbolic gesture to honor the journey and the lessons learned, awaited, the moment where the unseen became fully visible. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the newly completed garden. Children ran along the pathways, their laughter carrying through the air like light itself. Clara stood near the center's entrance, watching them move with confidence, her hands folded gently. The energy of months of patient work radiated quietly around her. Evelyn approached, holding a small wooden cane, polished and smooth, a symbol of her growth. Her golden hair caught the sunlight, eyes bright with concentration. She extended the cane toward Clara, a simple gesture that carried more weight than any speech. Clara accepted it, taking the cane with reverence. She knelt to Evelyn's level, letting the child's small hand rest atop her own. There was no fanfare, no applause, only the recognition of progress, dignity, and the unseen power that had been nurtured in silence. Victor stepped back, watching the exchange. His suit was now lightly dusted from the day's activity, but his posture carried quiet pride rather than authority. He realized that the lesson of the center was not one he could impose. It was lived, experienced, and earned. Around them, the volunteers moved efficiently, guiding therapy, assisting children, offering encouragement. The transformation was evident not only in the children, but in the community itself. Hushed conversations carried mutual respect. The past hierarchies had shifted subtly. Presence, patience, and skill now spoke louder than wealth or status. Clara rose, taking a slow, deliberate step toward the small fountain in the garden's center. The water glimmered, reflecting sunlight like fractured jewels. She placed the cane beside the fountain, a symbolic act of the journey completed, the acknowledgement that strength, dignity, and growth were shared, not claimed. Evelyn clapped her hands softly, a small smile breaking across her face. Victor knelt briefly, offering his hand to steady her, not as a protector, but as an ally. Together, they watched the children navigate the garden, their movements confident, deliberate, and full of life. Clara's mother, Anna, arrived quietly, carrying a small notebook she had once kept for Clara. She opened it, revealing sketches, observations, and notes accumulated over years. She laid it beside the cane. The two women exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement. History, struggle, and dedication had converged in this moment. No words were necessary. The lesson was clear. True influence was measured not by wealth, privilege, or recognition, but by the unseen impact one had on lives, quietly and steadfastly. The once overlooked power of discipline, presence, and integrity had become visible, undeniable. As the sun dipped lower, the garden's light softened. Clara, Evelyn, and Victor stood together in contemplative silence. The world beyond the walls could watch, but the truth of the moment, earned, respected, and shared, was theirs alone. In the quiet strength of the unseen, dignity blooms where it was once denied. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments.